Good evening, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar. We'll be discussing climate change and brain health, and particularly a very opportune time at the launch of the CliCBrain project. So, as most of you will know, evidence has increasingly shown the degree to which our brain's development and health across our life course is influenced by social, environment, and physiological factors, which are often termed the exposome. And as such, the impact of climate change on our brains and brain health, both directly and indirectly, through exacerbating other inequities and threats to brain health, makes this a very timely and important topic of consideration, research, and discussion. On our panel today, we are joined by Agustin Ibanez, who's Professor of Brain Health at GBHI and School of Medicine Trinity, and he's also Director of the Latin American Brain Health Institute. Jane Stout, Professor of Ecology and Vice President for Biodiversity and Climate Action in Trinity, also from Trinity College. Zul Morali, who's the founding director of the Brain and Mind Institute at the Aga Khan University in Kenya and also in Pakistan. Simone Kuhn, who's director of the Research Center for Environmental Neuroscience in the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And Sheena Barrett, who's head of research and learning at the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Ireland. So a really stellar panel, and we're very much looking forward to this discussion. I might ask Jane to give a few opening remarks, and begin the webinar.
Thank you, Owen, and hello, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen there. You can see the slide. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar today. As Owen said, I'm the Vice President for Biodiversity and Climate Action in Trinity, a relatively new position that I've been in for almost 4 years now, but my substantive position is as a Professor of Ecology. So I spent my research career trying to understand how organisms interact with the environment, and whilst the organisms that I don't usually specialize on are humans, it's really interesting for me, the work that you're doing, and particularly in the CliCBrain project. So just as a bit of an introduction to Trinity sustainability and the work that we do, so Trinity has it launched its strategic plan last year called Thrive. And in this strategic plan is this statement that biodiversity and climate action are a foundation to everything that we do in Trinity. And in our sustainability strategy, which was launched just the previous year, we stated that we'll be a university, a place, a community where climate change and biodiversity loss are addressed in a holistic, integrated and health-focused way to protect and restore our planetary home for future generations. So what we're trying to do in Trinity is really to look at these issues of climate change, not in isolation, but in association with changes in other aspects of nature and how that affects us, humanity, and our health and our well-being. And I suppose just for context, it comes as probably no surprise to most of you on this call that the planet, the state of the environment, isn't particularly good. So scientists have identified these 9 critical global processes that are essential for a stable Earth system, and have identified boundaries to each of these processes within which there's a safe operating space for humanity. And this is the planetary boundaries concept. And breaching these boundaries can cause catastrophic environmental changes and breach this safe operating space for humanity. And the latest assessment of these 9 boundaries is that 7 out of 9 of these boundaries that we shouldn't exceed, that we shouldn't breach to breach the safe operating space for nature, for humans, have actually been breached. So biosphere and ecosystem health, the things that I work on, the diversity of our systems and their capacity to support life, these systems have been breached. We're all aware of climate change. We know that CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have caused already almost a 1.5 degree global warming, and we're on track for 2.5, 3, 4 degrees warming by the end of the century. And the latest boundary to be breached is ocean acidification. So rising concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere don't just control the global climate. 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with ocean, and this excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dissolves into the ocean, acidifies the ocean, and this affects the ability of marine life to form shells and skeletons, and this can have huge impacts on marine ecosystems and marine food chains. So what I'm saying is what you probably already know is that humanity has fundamentally changed the physical, biological, and chemical nature of our planet. And of course, this is very risky. This has huge risks for us as humanity. So this is the Global Risk Report for 2026, just published by the World Economic Forum. And we can see there that the top three risks in the long term are all related to environmental issues. So the biggest long-term risk in the next 10 years is extreme weather events, then biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, and thirdly, critical change to Earth systems. So this is where these breaches of planetary boundaries cause critical changes to systems, some of our cryosphere, the frozen parts of the planet, some of our rainforests. When these conditions in these ecosystems change, they shift and can't necessarily change back. So really large scale and irreversible change. And of course, we know that there are also associated health risks. And I just wanted to highlight on the left here the International Governmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, otherwise known as IPBES. It's a science policy panel that published this report the year before last on the interlinkages between biodiversity, water, food, and health, and really just highlighted the need for integrated solutions, and that siloed approaches to these issues are going to be counterproductive. They also highlighted that over 50% of the global population is highly vulnerable to compounding risks. So these compounding risks of environment, of biodiversity loss, of climate change, of water issues, and how that affects our food and our health systems. And on the right-hand side there, I've just put in an image of the One Health approach, because again, this advocates for a collaborative, multi-sectoral, transdisciplinary approach, working at all levels, from the local, the regional to global levels, to achieve optimal health outcomes for people, recognizing this interconnection between human health, between animal health, and between environmental health. So that's the kind of the global context. And in Trinity, what we've done is set three headline targets in our strategy. And these are around climate, nature, and health. And so we have, as a public body in Ireland, we have obligations to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And as a university, we're looking to halve our emissions by 2030 and be net zero by 2040. In terms of nature, our target is to manage 30% of our campuses for nature by 2030. At the moment, if we actually look at green space in Trinity, even though we're a very small constrained city centre site, over half of our site, more than 50% of our campus is green. But what we want to make sure is that we're managing at least 30% of our campus for nature. And then health. And what we really want to see is healthier Trinity, a healthy Trinity by 2030. So we're trying to implement our sustainability strategy across everything that we do in Trinity to meet these targets by 2030. So that's embedding in our education, in our research, in our community and our engagement, and in our operations, what we do in the university. So in terms of our education, we've a very bold, ambitious strategic objective for all Trinity staff and students to be empowered to develop the knowledge, skills and attitudes that are necessary. And we've started a programme of embedding education for sustainable development across different courses across the whole university. And Trinity is, I'm delighted, we're a Responsible Futures accredited institution. And what this is a student-led audit of our sustainability work and the embedding of sustainability in our formal curriculum, our informal curriculum, and the subliminal curriculum. And a group of students shown in the image there on the right carried out this audit in October 2024, and we have this accreditation. So we're making some progress. We're not there yet, but we're making progress. Our research objective is to enable and support research that really can cause transformational change. And I think the research that's happening in the Global Brain Institute and through the CliCBrain project really does address this need for quality, novel research that can really help us to address practical problems. We also want to do our research more sustainably, and so we have a program of green labs and a dedicated green labs officer to try and reduce the impacts of our research in terms of the waste generated, the energy used, the water, etc. And there's lots of different researchers across Trinity. So the Trinity Climate Gateway is a network of researchers. More than 400 people who have from across the university have put their hands up and said, yes, we do climate research. We're interested in climate research. And that network will help us to build those interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary collaborations that are necessary. In terms of our community, our objective is to collaborate and engage. We know we can't do this all by ourselves. So that's collaborating, engaging internally with our colleagues, with our students, but also externally as well. And we're doing an awful lot of work to get people together, to increase awareness, and to change behaviour, both within and outside the university. And then in terms of operations, it's really to address our day-to-day operations to be more environmentally sustainable, but also to put in place operational plans for a healthier, more resilient future. So these are some of the things we're working on at the moment. We've just launched our biodiversity plan and our campus travel plan. And both of these look at that interaction of climate, nature, and health. We have a draft decarbonisation strategy to really tackle the thorny issues of Scope 1 emissions from our campus. Our sustainability manager, Jane Hackett, is leading on developing a circularity, a sustainable waste plan. So basically where we join up what we're bringing into the university through our procurement system and what we're putting out through our waste system to be more circular, to join those two things up. And we're very proud that we are a healthy campus, and Healthy Trinity is a group that have been working over the last 12 years, 13 years to promote health on campus and to promote collaboration between academic and professional partners for research-led health promotion and improved health in our college community and beyond, and working with partners in the HEA and internationally as well. So all of that just gives you a bit of a flavour of what we're doing in Trinity in terms of addressing sustainability, in terms of climate, nature and health. And I know sustainability is a much broader concept than just those three things. But really, the final point I want to make is that it's so important that we collaborate and that we work together on this. Like I say, no individual can do this on their own. And collaboration, whether it's getting people involved and engaged, raising awareness, influencing policy, changing direction in our teaching. All of this is so important for us to be able to achieve those goals and to reach a more sustainable future. So I'll stop there and just to again welcome you to this webinar and thank the people that are involved in this project, and Owen for leading things, because I think it's fantastic and it really aligns with what we're doing elsewhere in the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and very nice framing of both the issues we're facing and where this fits into kind of Trinity's strategy and what you're working on. And I'll hand over to the person who's really leading the project now, who's Agustin Ibanez. Um,
Should I start?
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Owen. And thank you, Jane, for the wonderful presentation. I love this ecological view and how, um, the connections within climate, exposome in general, nature, and health are, a critical driver that is mostly ignored in some fields of health. So I will try to put this attention in this um, mostly neglected area. Those are my disclosures, and I will try to go fast as we are a little bit delayed, but happy to provide more details after that. So the first thing that I want to bring to you is something that I call it the brain health synercom. The synercom is something that we know that happens in real life. So environments like exposome, climate change, pollution, socioeconomic status, social exposome also, right? Have a huge interactions not only with the brain but also with your full whole body health. This is the synercom, the interactions between different level of the brain, different level of the body, different levels of the environment, and the synergy that happen across these systems. Most of the research in brain health and neuroscience are ignoring this connection, and we are just at the beginning to trying to understand these connections. I will give you some quick example of how social aspect or physical aspect of the environment impact the health. So for instance, the inequality of a country, the level of inequality of a country is a most important driver, is a really more important driver than other things like age, education, or even socioeconomic status at the moment of major brain dynamics. The difference in education that happened, for example, between North and South, in this case in US versus Latin America, are huge, but most of these differences in terms of volume and structure are associated with educational disparities. But most important is education quality. When we look at education quality in global settings, there are big difference in terms of the volume and the connections of your brain, both in aging and dementia. But also when you start to understand this idea of the synercom, or the synergetics of the compound effects, so we were able to collect information about, education in three generations, your parents, your grandpas, the quality, if it was a public or private, the food insecurity, the financial status across your lifespan, the assets, if you have one, zero car, three cars, one house with floor, no floor, socioeconomic status, childhood experience, etc. And we create this compound measure. With this effect, we were able to show that the social exposome have a huge biological embedding across multiple domains: mental health, cognitive skills, functionality in everyday behavior, but also brain properties. So this is why the exposome is really embedded in your health and in your brain health, and we need more research in that regard. But as I mentioned before, what happened when we start to look at the combined effect? The first paper was shown that, where do you live? Like if you live in Latin America, in the South, or in Europe, or in US, the pace of the acceleration of your brain is different, irrespective of your chronological age. We also shown that, female gender tend to have accelerated aging, especially if the persons live in the South. And we also shown that socioeconomic status and pollution are important drivers of this accelerated brain aging. Then we expanded this research and showing across 40 countries that, there are huge disparities regarding the pace of the people, of the brain acceleration people. So people from Africa, Egypt, and South Africa tend to have the largest accelerated aging, followed by Latin America, Asia, and then Mediterranean and Europe, and North Europe have the more healthy aging. But most important, we found that multiple factors, not only pollution, or socioeconomic status, but sociopolitical instability plays a role in, accelerating or delaying the aging. This is a paper just accepted in Nature Medicine, in which we shown for the first time that important aspects related to climate change, like temperature, precipitation, climate disasters, water quality, air pollution. All of these have an impact in accelerating the brain across different regions. But most important, the interaction between climate, non-climate, physical exposome, social exposome have a huge impact, have a kind of quasi-exponential acceleration of the brain aging in both aging and different types of dementia. Even the effect of this exposome was comparable or larger than the effect that you see in accelerated aging of the brain of patients with dementia, which is a really scary data. We are starting to do biophysical modeling to understand mechanisms, global properties of the brain associated to, intrinsic mechanisms that are more impacted by the phenotype and expotype, like the combination of these external factors. So I think that this is the synercom, the idea that to understand brain dynamics, we not need just only integrate information in the brain, but incorporate the body and incorporate the environment. The body is essential because environment have a overall impact, not just in the brain, not just in the mental stress, but also in the body. Thinking pollution or nanoplastic, for example. This is also important to understand, for example, this huge heterogeneity across countries. Like Colombia is a country that represents an accentuated level of many problems that we have in multiple places: narco-trafficking, displacements, socioeconomic inequality, a very fragile health system. So how we can understand brain health if we don't incorporate that ecological, environmental aspect? This is also important for understand resilience, not only disease, as resilience is not just a property of a gene. It's also part of your body health, your inflammatory system, your metabolic system, your cardiometabolic system, but also is an important aspect of your self-regulation, abilities to cope with the stress, but also for your family or your community that can act as a buffer to protect the long-term impact of the cumulative stress in your life, or allostatic load, as it's called. And this is the kind of connection that we want to bring with the CliCBrain. This is a wonderful project with 22 centers, 16 countries, in which we are going to promote transdisciplinarity, to create models, from computational models to implementation science to policy recommendations, in which we can really connect the dots between macro levels like climate change or exposome and individual micro level like interaction between neurons or mental health. This is essential, as Jen mentioned, for integrate these neuroecological links with a One Health approach. We need to start to make the connection between body, brain, animal health, and environmental health. And this is why our research objectives and collaboration objectives are trying to tackle all of this. We will have a very diverse teams coordinated by Trinity, but involving, the American University in El Cairo, the Universidad of Los Andes in Colombia, and other groups. So we are really looking forward for the kickoff. Today we have the first formal meeting with all our partners, and we look forward for 4 years of continuous research, implementation, and policy improvement, connecting the dots between exposome, climate change, and brain health. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Agustin. It's great to have an overview of such important research and really linking it into what we're trying to do with the CliCBrain project. We're also joined by a small sample of the many wonderful partners we have on that project. So I would first who talk a little bit about themselves and their work, and then we hopefully go for some questions and answers for the audience, or just a bit of a panel discussion. If anyone has any questions and answers, please pop them into the question and answer function on the Zoom webinar. Zul, I might call on you first to speak a little bit about your work and your interest in this area and this project.
Thank you, Jan. So I'm Zul Morali. I'm the founding director of the Brain and Mind Institute, which is based in the Aga Khan University and has got footprints in many countries, but specifically in East Africa and in South and Central Asia. So as the word indicates, Brain and Mind Institute, our focus is on brain health and mental health. And if I can maybe share my slides, I'll show you a little bit about what Brain and Mind Institute is all about. So I hope you can see that. So hope this is visible. Are we good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason we exist in the geographies where we're at is that we're trying to address two major gaps. One is a knowledge gap, and one is a service gap. In knowledge gap, we don't know about the biological and genetic underpinnings of some of these mental health, brain health conditions, and and also in terms of the services, we don't have enough experts or even access to care infrastructure. So we are trying to address those issues. And a couple of things that I'd like to point out that is from the population perspective is that the population is fairly young in both those geographies that I was talking about in Asia and in sub-Saharan Africa, is that the population is basically under about 20, the median age. That means half the population is under 20 years old. But what's also quite interesting is that there is now, since the communicable diseases have come under control, there is an increasing lifespan. People are living longer. As a consequence, the older population is increasing exponentially. And I think that the projections are that they'll triple or quadruple by 2050. So it's a very, very rapid growth in older individuals. And our approach at the Brain and Mind Institute, essentially, or through entire the Aga Khan University, is to use an integrated mental health framework whereby, unlike in the global north, where we focus a lot on severe and moderate illnesses, we think that our approaches should be to be tackling the population at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the largest sector of the population, people who are well, where you can do promotion, prevention, and particularly early detection, early identification, and low intensity care and interventions that can all be done in a major aspect at the community level. And we focus on research, but most importantly, innovation and translation of how do we take research to action. And we have a footprint in education where we're doing a lot of public-facing education as well as policy formulation with the government partners. Our team essentially is very diverse, multi-sectoral team. This is an early picture of when we were doing our strategic planning. You can see that there are people from all walks of science and arts in our team, from neuroscientists to health economists and the works. Very quickly, I'll show you what our strategic areas are. We're trying to build resilient and thriving communities across the lifespan by addressing three major areas. They include mental health, where we focus on suicide prevention, depression, anxiety, psychosis. We have a platform on healthy brain aging, which is very relevant to today's topic. And finally, we are looking at transgenerational resilience, where we're looking at the family dynamics and violence and things like that. And those are the vertical pillars, but cross-cutting are focus on prevention, promotion, early detection, system strengthening policies, multimorbidities, assessing physical and mental health, climate change, and finally the exposome collecting like multidimensional biological, psychological, environmental factors that influence those three verticals. And the approach that we're taking is that we are creating longitudinal cohorts in sub-Saharan Africa and in South and Central Asia, And we're creating what we're calling living labs. And these are community-based infrastructures where we're working very closely with and in the communities. And essentially, we are in those regions that are very climate vulnerable. So in sub-Saharan Africa, as you know, it is a border region where the climate is changing very rapidly. And the other hand, when we go to the northern areas of Pakistan, where we have other living labs as well, and those are mountainous regions where they are very vulnerable in terms of the climate impact. They have things like glacier melting and flooding and things like that. And we're using our intervention is using technologies to help not only do assessments door to door, but also then provide interventions that are relevant to the community members. So we're trying to bring interventions at the doorstep, which is a bit different, using community health workers. And in this case, we are using lady health workers. And when we were doing the study in Pakistan, there were major floods ongoing, and we were able to carry our studies out because we were deploying people who actually lived in the communities as our partners. And what you can see that if you identify people who are in need and give them low-level support using lady health workers, a year down the road, their levels of anxiety and depression had fallen almost by 65%. And so this is really very exciting for us because we can now feel that we can make a difference in the communities, even though we may not have all the experts that we need. Neither, I think, will we ever have those experts. So we need to look at alternate approaches. But in terms of the research in the area of healthy brain aging, this is just a cross-cutting slide that tells you about the kinds of projects we're doing: cultural adaptation and validation of cognitive tests, so that we can use the right tests for the right populations that are contextually sensitive. We have a project called Braille Resilience Kenya, which I'll tell you about. We're looking at gender differences, ethnographic surveys, and we're doing a project called Worldwide Fingers, which is a Fingers Africa project, where we are looking at modifiable risk factors that are of relevance to brain aging in response to different stressors. So I'll just highlight just two of those projects. One is the Brain Resilience Kenya study, where we're actually picking a population that has been diagnosed with cancer. And the reason we did that is that we're considering that as a major stressor. But these stressors are quite general. And we're looking at family, community, lifestyle, cultural parameters. We're looking at depression, food security, substance use, climate change, multidimensional poverty, adverse experiences, and then looking at biological markers, the epigenetic clock. We're looking at telomere length. We're looking at through the biomarker core, and also looking at the brain imaging and cognitive functioning, and looking at the cumulative holistic picture in people who are once diagnosed with cancer. We want to find out who's going to thrive and who's going to become frail, and can we use some of the information and biomarkers in particular to help us identify those risk factors. The other project that I'll just briefly mention is Fingers Africa, which is a replication of a study that has been carrying out in Europe quite extensively, where we know for a fact that if you address the modifiable risk factors, that you can actually prevent dementia in approximately half the cases. And so are those the same risk factors? Are the modifiable risk factors same that are identified in Europe as they are in Africa? So we're doing assessments to see what our modifiable risk factors are in sub-Saharan Africa, and then can we modify them? And does modification, lifestyle modification, actually help in improving brain health of those populations? And last but not least, we had a conference focused on dementia and aging in Africa in partnership with Nature and Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative. And the focus was to bring in all the experts from across Africa and globally to actually have a dialogue on how we can actually what is the picture of dementia in Africa, and how can we have global partnerships in actually changing the projected outcomes. Last but not least, I'll mention that we're creating a Pan-African network with Egypt, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, and South Africa, because what we also want to do, very in synchrony with what Augustine was been trying to kind of correlate, bring the data together, but we wanted to make sure that the African data is harnessed in a way that we can actually share with the global populations. So with that, I'm going to stop and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Sewell. It's always really impressive to see the breadth of things that the Brain and Mind Institute are undertaking and the various collaborations. I might hand over to Simone now. And again, to the audience, if there's anyone who has any questions, please pop them into the Q&A, and we hopefully will have time to get to them later.
Hi, can you see my screen and slides?
Yes.
Super. So I'll focus a bit more on the physical living environment, because this is what we mostly do within our institute. And I want to stress a bit that we are also trying to go a bit beyond these observational and correlational studies, because I somehow feel, I mean, I love these studies, especially where you have like all kinds of health parameters and lots of environmental parameters. But I think it also helps if you can go down and actually get causal evidence for, in fact, environment acting on the brain and not reversely. As you've seen before, I mean, what we all tend to do is use map data, sort of map where people live and characterize their home environment. This is something that we've done in the UK Biobank data, where we've tried to basically correlate lots of environmental indicators with hippocampal volume. Hippocampal volume, because that's the brain area that usually most quickly changes in case of stress or any other kind of learning. So that's a very plastic brain region. I'm not so much interested in telling you what we found. I briefly skim over this. So interestingly, we found lots of indicators from the air pollution spectrum, so to speak, but also from green space being near participants' home address. So even though some people from the air pollution field keep saying green space is just an aid to lower air pollutants, this seems to be important for other reasons as well, I guess because people sort of like greenery. The next block of variables that was very important in the prediction of hippocampal volume were noise levels. But above and beyond this, we try to also invest in twin studies. Why do we do this? Because somehow, like animal studies, if you look into animals and whether environments affect their brain, you usually take genetically identical mice and put them in different environments. We can't do this with humans, but what we can do is that we can recruit monozygotic twins who are genetically identical and then who happen to live in different areas of the world, or at least locally have different environments, where you then can exclude that actually the genetics that they have make them move to different areas. Because this can all be, I mean, all the results that we typically see when we run correlation studies could also be driven by people choosing to live at a certain location rather than the environment impacting brain. And for that reason, to get closer at causality, we also do intervention studies. So here's one that Sonja is involved in, who's also part of CliCBrain, where she had people go into the scanner before and after a walk, either in a green region, namely Grunewald Forest in Berlin, or going to a busy city route. And then we looked at amygdala activity. Amygdala is strongly related to stress processing. And what we found is basically a reduction, and a significant reduction of amygdala activity when people have done that walk in the green environment, also in face of stress. So if you show people these fearful faces as above here, that's a stressor, and people usually react with having higher amygdala activity, but we can bring this down by this walk in nature. Interestingly, that activity does not go up if people see or are surrounded by cities. So seemingly this greenery really seems to have an important and healing effect on humans, at least in a short-term range. We recently got a mobile MRI scanner that will hopefully help us now to seek out different environments and not just those directly surrounding our institute. I think this is very important because I mean, as people who do neuroimaging might know, different areas and different scanners have different brains. So just assuming we can pool all this data, I mean, I think we should do this and we should explore this. But technically speaking, ideally, you have that all on one scanner. So this thing will allow us to measure people from different regions on the same machine. We've also done studies where we have, mostly on ourselves, now on more subjects, have scanned ourselves repeatedly, up to 50 times over a few weeks, and then tracked what we have done on the day before in order to somehow determine what are these short-term effects. So if I've spent, say, more time outdoors, and that's data that I'm showing here, so the more time people have spent outdoors, 24 hours before going into the scanner, the bigger their brain is in this prefrontal region. So this seemingly suggests that even our brain structure that's usually believed to be pretty stable is malleable, and we do benefit from spending time outdoors. Sadly, in that study, we didn't know whether that was time in green spaces or in built-up environments, but at least that, I think, is a suggestion that we are not bound to where we live and where our home address is and where we may afford to live, but we can also choose environments in which we stay over the day. We are currently repeating this study with a very extensive assessment of environmental parameters. So we are soon going to have data where we know a lot more in terms of environments where people have been before the scan has been taken. And then we also try to do acute studies, namely, for example, using virtual reality. Here is an example where we took an office environment and basically tested that without any plants and with green plants in there, and then had people sit down on that sofa here and perform cognitive tasks. On the one hand, creativity tasks, and on the other hand, working memory tasks. And what we found is, interestingly, that if there were plants present, people perform better in the creativity task as well as in the working memory task. And for a cognitive scientist, as I've been raised without neuroscience, is really interesting that if you have more in that room and actually more to process, that this is not more load on the brain, but actually that this relieves the brain seemingly and gives more space to be able to do these tasks very well. Above and beyond this type of research, we are also looking at house facades and different types of outward environment that I'd also be interested to bring into CliCBrain in order to quantify how the built environment basically acts on brain. Yeah, what do we have in mind for CliCBrain? I'd love to basically extend what we know how to extract in terms of the physical environment to other data sets like the BrainLab study that Augustine talked about, but also data from Africa. I know that there's a Unity project that has lots of data from Africa on these low field scanners, which I think would be interesting to explore. At the same time, we also do studies more on the interventional side, where we, for example, look at VR in a climate chamber where you can regulate the temperature, and where we then can see, does it make especially bad effects if people have that heat around them, and then still see nature images that show the sort of disaster after having had too high temperatures on a forest, for example. And with this, I'd like to thank everyone. And if someone is interested in the research that we do, we've recently released this book on environmental neuroscience. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Simone. Really nice work, and I think it's so fantastic to have you as part of the CliCBrain project. I think there'll be definitely lots of links and possibilities. Before we go to Q&A, I'm going to hand over to someone coming from the cultural sector who we're also very, very lucky to have as a partner on the CliCBrain project. So I'd like to introduce Sheena from the Irish Museum of Modern Art.
Thanks, Owen. Hi, everybody. So just to introduce you to IMA. So IMA is the Irish Museum of Modern Art. Our ambition is to be the most welcoming cultural site in Ireland. And then within that, we have 4 strong pillars, really to be radically public, a catalyst for change, a global connector, and a centre for research and learning. So in that sense, the CliCBrain project really sort of connects to all of those, but I just wanted to quickly show you the site. So we're here at IMA, formerly the Royal Hospital Kilmainham, so originally a context for health, a British military hospital. But we also have these incredible grounds. So even in terms of what Simone was talking about there, that idea of being able to experience nature as well as experience art, and all of the increasing research that's showing the evidence for reduction in stress levels around that. So our program in Art and Wellness really is called Immer Horizons, and the idea of it is to support brain health and creativity right across the life course. And the idea is to use the power of art to support mental and brain health, tackle inequality, which is also something that's been mentioned here today, and reimagine how we care for ourselves and each other. By creating inclusive creative spaces, we look to lead new conversations at the intersection of art, health, wellbeing, and community. Horizons really is about helping us to build a more connected, empathetic, curious, and inclusive society. And so I've just included a couple of pictures really of what that physically looks like within the gallery space. So you can see the Azure program there. That's one of our curators, Barbara Ann Harkin, leading our dementia-friendly work. And Sundara Higgins, one of our other curators, leading an In the Moment workshop. We would work very closely with the Global Brain Health Institute, who you can see here, last year's research fellows coming to experience the museum. In addition to our work in Immer Horizons, we also host a festival called Earth Rising. And the idea of that is really to present artistic and cultural experiences that catalyse climate conversations and actions. We really think about where a museum can play a civic role in convening this kind of cross-sectoral, cross-disciplinary space. But we're also particularly interested in how a museum can support contexts in which we can think about curiosity, hope, how people can work together, because, you know, as you'll have seen from Jane's presentation there at the start, the news is very bleak, and the context in which people are living and absorbing all of this information is very heavy. So we think about the museum as a space where we can support exchange, connection, and opportunities for dialogue and action. I suppose through our work with GBHI, and part of our excitement about being part of this CliCBrain is, I mean, you'll have seen from all of the presenters who preceded me, the incredible research that's happening globally. But a lot of the work that we do here is very much informed by the research that's coming from GBHI and also from the Mercer Institute for Successful Aging, and what that tells us about the impact of creativity on brain health. So when we think about how arts experiences really create these moments of connection, they support our opportunities to make decisions, particularly as we age. A lot of that kind of agency can be removed from our lives, and this museum provides this kind of environment where we can still offer opportunities for people to think critically and have opportunities to connect with each other. It's a very social experience. And so a lot of what we're learning from GBHI in terms of the supports for successful aging and brain health, and we can map then across our programs and develop them accordingly. So really, we're just excited to work with all of these researchers around that, to build out on the analogous research that we have that can support the development of our work in a qualitative fashion, but also to have the opportunity to have someone else to comment here so that we can really support the research and action in context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheena. And it's always I have to say, working with you and the folks at IMA over the past couple of years has been a real treat for us here in GBHI, and it's great to see things develop. So thankfully we have a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone in the audience would like to propose anything, we can pop it into the question and answer function. But I might actually, just to get things going, I might go back to Augustine with a general question, which he might be able to kind of pull together some of the strands here. So Augustine, thinking about the sort of kind of multimodal, multicentric work you've been leading over the years, where do you see are the current gaps? And, you know, where do you see the role of a project like CliCBrain and the transdisciplinary partnership in helping that kind of, filling those gaps and kind of helping kind of bridge that evidence to practice translation?
Thank you, Owen. I think there are multiple gaps across levels. So from the top, that we have very important gaps regarding the theoretical development. We don't understand how, for example, we can understand how, let's say, pollution impact at micro level, let's say stress or toxic things in little neurons. But we don't understand the embodied approach, so the compound effects across levels. So we need to really develop neurosystemics model, ecological model of the brain. This is a big gap, I would say. Second gap is regarding measures. Most of our measure of climate change and exposome in general, they come from aggregate level or not really precise model or static measures. So we need to do more dynamical measures across the lifespan that can, we can understand the fluctuation between different metrics and the fluctuation of mental health, brain health, or whatever we want to measure at the health level. And I think the third gap is funding. We need more funding initiatives that really look at the connections more than the expertise. I think that this is why CliCBrain is going to contribute in this field. We hope with the CliCBrain we can, at the very least, advance or progress a little bit toward these current gaps. I don't remember the second part of the question, Owen.
No, I think you've covered it all, Augustine. That's really good. And thinking about that kind of translation piece, maybe Zul, obviously one of the things with CliCBrain, obviously we're drawing together a lot of different countries, a lot of different people doing different sorts of research, and with a goal that we can find some both specific and generalizable insights. So that's things that, broad ideas that might work in multiple different places. And as someone with such deep experience of working in, both East Africa and Pakistan, quite different contexts with kind of public health and population study project. I just wondering if you have any thoughts on the balance between kind of generalizable ideas and localizable solutions.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that's what we are striving for. So the interventions, for example, that we develop in Pakistan, we are now trying to replicate in East Africa to see the generalizability of some of the interventions that we have created. And we'll learn from that to see how generalizable they are. I mean, obviously, there are differences from the global north because I spent a lot of years in Canada for coming to Africa. But the situation was quite different there. And some of the, for example, not only the interventions, but also the tests that we're using in the global north were not applicable when I came to Africa because there are many other challenges in terms of the educational status of the populations, their familiarity of using those tests. And so we had to kind of develop specific tests that are more contextually sensitive. But then they become, even when you develop those in the global south, it doesn't mean that it's going to be transferable to other areas of the global south. And so this is something that's quite fascinating to us. And we're trying to study that and find out what is transferable and what's not, just like we are with the Fingers Africa project, to see the modifiable risk factors. Are they the same? And if you want to address those risk factors, how do you do them in different contexts? For example, in Africa, you don't have tons of gyms available for exercise. We are trying to find out what kind of exercise might be contextually meaningful. And so we are finding that engaging in dancing is much more a solution than having a membership in the gyms because the gyms are not there. So things like that, we're very trying to contextualize, but then the context varies from one geography to the next.
So it's obviously quite difficult, but do you find that there's still, I guess, even if the specific application is quite different, but it's still possible to glean some generalizable approaches.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, we are hoping there's many more similarities than there are differences. Yeah.
Well, so are we with this project, I hope. And actually, just on that kind of policy translation or a translation into practice, Simone, it strikes me that your work is so relevant to kind of urban planning and design. And hello,
Sick kid, sorry.
I'm wondering, like, have you been doing any work, let's say, in the context of kind of design or planning at this point, or is that a little bit further down the line?
No, we have used a bit of generative AI lately to somehow find, because that's a great tool to somehow link human experience to those appearances of house facades. So we have actually run some studies trying to have people rate house facades, and then a computer learn whether people find this an inviting house and then generate more inviting facades in order to somehow pinpoint what is it about a facade, because that's complex. It's not just people don't just linearly like big doors or a lot of windows.
Yeah.
It really scales, and it's a huge interaction of different factors. So I mean, we realize it's difficult because it's not just one dimensional, this whole architectural feature game in a sense, but I think you can still do a lot with, say, Google Street View imagery. I mean, there is imagery of all of the houses surrounding people who live there. So I think you can nicely utilize all of this in trying to characterize what is that living, or how the building height, for example, that you can relatively easily determine. And I think that greatly affects how people perceive their environment. I mean, in some cities, you can't even see the sky, which is something that humans are like have grown up with. I mean, regularly we can see the sky, but in cities we can't anymore. And there's nice data suggesting that depression levels and stuff may depend on how much light and how much sky you actually are exposed to.
So I'm really excited. There are some people at Trinity who are involved in the project who are very interested in they're working in urban design and stuff. And there would be, I'd say they would love to have as the project progresses, have a chance to chat with you and the people working with you. We're right up on time. So I might, Jane, just return to you just to close for a closing comment. Really, it kind of and to kind of bring it back home to some extent. I mean, in terms of considering kind of Ireland and Trinity's potential to support and lead innovation in this space, and kind of really lead to kind of both local and global impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone. I was absolutely fascinated listening to all of those presentations. And I think, this transdisciplinary approach, bringing together different disciplines, looking at the, things from different angles is just so rich and fruitful for innovative research that can really make a difference, and translating that research then into policy and practice on the ground is just fantastic. So I just want to thank everyone today and wish you the best of luck for the project. And I'm really keen to get involved and work with you guys if I can in some capacity. I think what you're doing here is really fantastic work. So well done. Thank you, and thanks to everyone who has joined us this evening and been involved.
Thank you very much, Jane. And thanks to all of the panelists and speakers, and indeed thanks to Mary and Helen in the back room for making it all happen and running it. So look, at that, I would say good night or good morning or good afternoon to everyone, and look forward to discussing this all with you again. Okay, bye-bye.